Can everyone hear me in the back? Sounding okay back there? Okay, great. Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to help facilitate this session. I'm always humbled when I'm in a room full of industry experts, and I hope, part of this is us as GE sharing some insights, some strategy as we progress through our 5-year roadmap here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I hope there's maybe things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say. Maybe it'll save you as you go through similar digital initiatives. But then I'm really hoping about halfway through we'll open it up, learn about things you're running into, how you're approaching digital for health and safety in your organization. So by way of background, again, I'm Sam Murley, EHS Digital Acceleration Leader for the company. I manage the emerging technology portfolio globally for GE, and really that's all about, creating a runway to facilitate digital transformation within the company. And it's both external and internal, so it's very much focused on let's not necessarily rebuild or build solutions from scratch. Let's go out and find those vendors, those solution providers, and have a quicker impact, right, and then facilitate that process internally. My background actually isn't in EH&S or HS&E. I'm a software engineer by trade. I always joke and kind of laugh at myself. I wrote a lot of spaghetti code. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but I found more excitement in kind of the business side of digital technology, and have been at GE now for 3 years, helping move that along. So a good slide about the makeup of GE today and our Tier 1 businesses. I think really for the framework of this discussion, draw your attention to the information in the lower right. So global company, 300,000 workers, distributed, fixed facilities, contractors. I know a lot of you can probably relate with that matrix of work. So as we got thinking about our roadmap and how we're going to approach this, we really found a great opportunity to insert digital with training, culture, management of change. So some of the things we're going to touch on there. First 20 minutes, I'm going to get through the first 5 bullets here, and then the second 20, invite Andy here, CEO and founder of RealWear, to join me up here, kind of get an open discussion going, very holistic, I think, Q&A and town hall type opportunity. So let's get into it. I love this slide. I love starting off with this slide because it shows where we've been, where we're at today, and where we're going. So this is our 5-year roadmap. Very strategic, high level for this format, but you can see back in year 1, 2 years ago, right, because we're 2018, somewhere in the middle here, getting close to closing some of these goals out. Year 1 was all about our data strategy, right? So 3 years ago, we knew that this technology in the middle and on the right was maturing fast enough that we'd have an opportunity to try it out and understand what the impacts of some of these technologies on the slide could have. But we wanted to make sure that we had a robust enough data strategy, right? So we wanted to scale. We didn't want to have to backtrack and re-implement. So we're a Gen Suite organization today. We're kind of a blended in terms of a platform approach. We have Gen Suite as our system of record, and then we use BI, dashboards, things like Spotfire and Tableau to move quick and customize different reports. So we set that up, but the exciting part, at least for me and what I do every day, is really here in the middle. And we're finding that these 6 technology categories across the company and very broadly are having an immense impact. And those 6, if you can't read in the back, are exoskeletons and ergonomic sensors, smart eyewear, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit, lone worker wearables and hazard sensing bands, like voltage sensing bands, IoT, industrial hygiene, monitoring devices, on-body, off-body, and then inspection robots. We're actually doing quite a bit as of late with different inspection robots to completely remove the human from the risk, but still keep them in the driver's seat as the ultimate decision maker. Just so we kind of know, where folks are at, I was curious, how many of you here, just by a show of hands, are thinking about digital, exploring digital solutions, for EH&S at your company, but haven't started a pilot yet? Okay. And then how many folks have started evaluating and piloting some type of technology? Okay. And has anyone here made it to the deployment state where you feel that there's such a strong business value, you've kind of figured all that out, that these types of solutions are deployment ready? Has anyone made it that far? Okay, good for you. We haven't made it quite that far, but we're getting very close. So curious later if you can share some insights as to where you're at and how you got there. I really think the story behind this, right, is moving from less of a reactive function across the company to more of a proactive and predictive. And we're starting to play with some of these things on the right in terms of artificial intelligence and vision systems that will recognize a potential hazard without having to put anything on the body, right? There's camera technology now, video analytic technology that we're finding could have immense value, and you don't have to train the operator on how to really do anything different. So I think some of these things, right, mixed with some things in the middle and, of course, all the way to the left, we're not turning things off or stopping things as we move through this roadmap. It's really adding to the toolkit for risk mitigation across the company. Okay? This is a newer one, and again, I apologize if you can't see it in the back. We started thinking through, as we've been going through this process, what's really important to a worker or a wearer, what features and value statements do they really care about, what's important to a site, right, or a supervisor or EHS, site leads, and then what's important to the business or the broader organization. And these are our principles. We've seen these things continue to bubble to the top from end user feedback. So I wanted to kind of point a few of these out. So again, a very micro to kind of macro approach. I think for us anyway, we've seen value in doing all of these from time to time, or just starting here and stopping here. Could be a data privacy issue. It could be other types of just operational, type constraints. Sometimes, you'll put technology on the body, and the data will always live with that person, and it won't go anywhere else. Other times, there's trade-offs if you pull that data and those insights through the organization. So, just a few, and there's some do's and don'ts later, but it's got to be comfortable. Don't expect people to wear something that you wouldn't wear yourself, and I think we'll get into that. Simple UI, simple navigation, the ability to receive alerts directly, as well as report concerns and hazards, I think is really important. We've seen that bubble to the top from an end user perspective. At the site, it gets a little bit different, right? It kind of goes into more macro business intelligence. So something that we've seen come through that vendors are providing, or that we've seen partnerships form, is this safety index trending, really understanding, using digital technology to understand who's at most risk if you don't know. If you know who those folks are, prove that you're pulling them from high to medium to low risk. And I think that's extremely important at the site level. And I think that's the value, right, of getting into this layer or this type of stakeholder and providing that information. I think the business, it kind of extrapolates out further. So we're doing things now like building ROI calculators to help financial leaders, value stream leaders really understand the benefits of technology just beyond the wow factor. What makes it cool? Why are employees excited? What does it do for productivity, quality, and of course, EH&S. So just some things there. Hopefully some insights. I know we'll share this with vendors as well as kind of our roadmap. And we use this as a checklist too. So when we're evaluating new technologies, we kind of go through and want to see, okay, are we checking off 50% of these things, less, more? And it's a good kind of guardrails as well as we go. So strategy, kind of how we approach things, I wanted to get into one of the technology categories, specifically talk about our progress with RealWear over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. I think smart eyewear, augmented reality, assisted reality, there was so much, it was kind of the story, right? It was this great story years ago, and I think now it's transitioned from this great story of an emerging technology to really the utility and the value. And when you make that transition and you listen to end users' feedback when they're trying things out, there are just, Andy, you'll argue, but from our perspective, there's just a few things that really honestly set this apart. So I think the biggest one, quite frankly, is the ability to move and swivel the lens completely out of the way. If you think about, when you're deploying emerging technology to mitigate risk, what are the risks that the technology is now introducing? What are those new risks? And if you expect a wind technician to climb up a wind tower and have a lens, in their face, they're not going to do it, and they shouldn't do it, right? So that when we started looking at the HMT1 and kind of testing it out, we got overwhelming feedback that was a feature that end users loved. I think the other one is voice navigation, right? So with wearable hardware devices, those that have a lot of buttons or are mainly button-driven, it takes a lot of training. There's often issues in the field if folks are wearing gloves, So I think the fact that it's 100% voice-driven is a huge win for us. And then, honestly, the industrial kind of ruggedized capabilities. You can drop it, you can spill water on it. It's ready to go. So, and full disclosure, I don't own any RealWear stock, but we're just, I feel compelled to share our story so that folks get it right. Not that other vendor solutions don't have a purpose or a great fit, but more broadly, we're just finding immense value, and we want to do it right. We don't want to lose our customers and the frontline end users by trying to continue to get them to try out something that's just not a good fit. So, good kind of high-level overview of some of those features. It's just so for folks, and I think you're going to demo it, for folks that haven't seen it before, it's PPE compliant, so it's not the helmet, right? It's what sits underneath the helmet, but it can snap into a helmet, and it's balanced, ergonomic friendly. So it's the black part or the under helmet device there that you're seeing on the screen. So what are we using it for? We are finding immense value in delivering work instruction to the point of work, both giving operators the information they need, but also where they get in a sticky situation or a bind, giving them the ability to remotely call and do a first-person telepresence session with an expert anywhere in the world. So we'll get to some of the T&L, I think, impacts of not having to send someone physically to a site. We mentioned, work at heights, highly hazardous types of operations, and I think the fact that it's hands-free, right? It's not a tablet that you may have to tie up one hand to hold, or a mobile device. It's completely hands-free, I think is an immense benefit. And I think just more general awareness, right? So if you've got an operator who has to go into a confined space, for example, one, there's features on the device that will help them execute that job faster. But now you kind of get into this platform for protecting lone workers. And you can do it in a little more effective way than kind of traditional methods. So some of the things we've seen, I mentioned this already in terms of swiveling back, unobstructed views, but that's why we really started looking at head-worn technology in the HMT1 in general. This is what we're seeing, and I mentioned that leading impact is the cost to send experts out to a site. Productivity downtime, it takes a couple days to get them there, quality issues, customer experience issues. We found great value in remote audits. Again, bringing electrical safety experts to the point of work, such as lockout tagout. They can't really do that as effective, especially again we've got to tie up one hand without something like the HMT1. So a couple other areas, knowledge transfer has been a big one as well. So you think of training, on-the-job training. Someone was talking about, I think it might have been yesterday, the new workforce is expecting kind of the YouTube model, the gig economy training model, right? And now you've got a platform to do that where if you've got an expert doing some task, they, one, can capture that, real live video with this type of device, but then two, that can be used as a follow-up, training asset or on-the-job training asset. So that knowledge transfer aspect, I think, is a key value proposition for sure. One we haven't been able to quantify exactly is exposure to risk. So we know we're increasing productivity with this type of technology, we're pulling someone out of a hazardous environment or hazardous operation maybe 50% sooner. We know we're having an impact then on reducing the probability of an event or injury. It's hard to calculate that if that event doesn't happen, but I think we'll be able to see that happen over time, a year or two, as maybe some of those things trend down. Okay? And I'll stop here. If there's folks in the audience that have had experience with smart eyewear, doing it today, looking at it, does anyone want to add some comments, jump in, maybe talk a little bit about what they're doing within their organization? Yeah, go ahead.
We're very early stages of utilizing the Microsoft HoloLens. We move about 1 million aircraft a year.
Okay.
Into and out of a hangar, across a ramp environment. And the HoloLens, for us, has provided a use case whereby it can actively scan, right? It can measure how far objects are from it, et cetera. And then it can actually place visual, audible, it can vibrate, doesn't shock yet. The wear, we're working on it. But it brings that sense of awareness, to the tug operator in a way that mitigates risk. So very early stages, but we're really excited about what it can do for us.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? You kind of have this spectrum of head-worn technology, and you've got some on the very left or far left, very immersive, right? And you've got some of the less immersive, but maybe more outdoor ready or functional for certain use cases. So I think you're right. For design, for training, capturing assets, 3D scanning those assets and using them later, I think the HoloLens is perfect. And I think you've got some good insights there we'll get into, talking about it may not be one or the other across the organization, right? But you may have kind of a collection of head-worn technology based on your use cases and what it needs to do.
Yeah, not to belabor, but I think one of the things that we always have to keep in mind, and you did a great job of outlining it, is the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have this device and you're wearing it. You can't do that.
Right.
With it.
Right.
You can't turn it, move it. If you're wearing it, you're wearing it. So I think as the technology evolves, it's going to get smaller and smaller, and one of the days it's going to be a contact lens. But we're not quite there yet.
Yep.
We've got to keep those things in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other comments? Yeah.
Yeah. One unique application that I've seen is actually way back on the prevention to design end, which is to say if you have the resource richness enough and a long-term enough design cycle, you're designing a manufacturing platform. Engineers are going to be designing it, but not necessarily looking at the risk involved. Getting operators to use AR, VR to actually interface with the CAD and go in there and actually see how it would work in practice is a really different experience and allows you to debug a lot of the EHS risk before you even start manufacturing something.
Yeah.
Totally different than the applied in the field context, but same sort of technology.
Yep. Yeah, you hit on another great point, right? Safely training someone as close as you can get to the real-world environment without actually exposing them to the risk. And I think for something like the HoloLens, that's, at least for our use cases, that's exactly, where that technology provides value. So that's great. Great comments. Quickly, do's and don'ts. I'll talk to maybe one or two of these and add one I don't think is on here. I think there's a balance between leading with consumer-focused technology versus industrial-focused technology. If you may actually have to go and try something that's more consumer-focused because it's going to be maybe more friendly, maybe easier to use, more comfortable to wear. But there's definitely pros and cons when you think of the other side. So I think for the context of this discussion, the fact that we've got an industrial-grade wearable, I think, is immense for us. I think it eases scale, right, and integration in the future. I already talked about, don't deploy something you wouldn't wear yourself. I think that's a great one. Don't underestimate the simplest solutions. I know early on, year one, when we were, quote-unquote, flexing the innovation muscle within the company, we were kind of maybe built the expectation that complex solutions are adding more value when most of the times they're not. So simple solutions, don't underestimate them. I think another one too, know when to pivot or persevere. we tried to build an EHS version of Siri about 2 years ago, and it kind of fell flat. And I think, if you pivot, you stop something, if you're capturing why and you're sharing that throughout the organization, maybe you're saving others from going through some of those headaches as well. So some good ones there. Before we do kind of the town hall portion, I just wanted to bring this up as kind of a synopsis of, again, kind of the strategy leading to execution. So on the left, 4 pillars of EH&S at the company, and I think the framework for digital really falls within simplification, people, and technology, or kind of all across, all 4. Out to the far right today, we've got over 2,200 wearables in the pilot process. We've got a number that have gone beyond that. We've got about 75, almost 80 global pilot programs, and again, those are external relationships we have with solution providers. We're supporting almost 200 sites and teams across the globe, and I think really important, which we did from the start, which has shown some success, is grassroots, right? So we've got an innovation hub. Anyone can post an idea, say, hey, I'm working with this exoskeleton company, look what it's doing at our site. Folks can come in and request sponsorship for a pilot, or start to do those things independently, create challenges, and I think that's been able to widen our pipe of getting these types of pilot programs through. So 75, we've deployed a handful, actually is deployment-ready technology. When we do that, we create a launch guide, deployment-type resources, and I think another thing too here is not doing it in a silo. We've opened up benchmarking discussions with institutions, folks like Boeing, Toyota, Ford as well, and I think that's been instrumental. And we're seeing, some of the things here on the screen, right? We're proving we can reduce workers' comp costs, increase culture, drive down I&I rates for sure when certain technology is in use. And I think that's really the story behind this. So I'll leave it. I was having a candid discussion actually with someone yesterday, a good discussion. We were talking about, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, it was kind of why would we do this? And I think now for us at least, or maybe in industry, it's not why would we, it's why wouldn't we do this? We're requiring people to wear PPE today. Why wouldn't we, equip them with voltage sensing bands, for example, and remove electrocutions and burns? So I think it's kind of in this interesting point in time right now in industry. I think we'll look back a couple years from now and it'll be the norm versus, quote unquote emerging technology. So that's it for the content. I want to invite Andy up to join me here, open up a town hall.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry. You say you don't overlook the simplest solution, but what about the simplest? In my business, we try heads-up displays, at least information displays, but because of the environment we're in, we can't actually use it. Let me just say that. But we have found that wireless video, head-mounted wireless video, with a third operator actually looking over the shoulder of the primary operator, has worked perfect to be able to guide the operator, if the operator has questions, to be able to provide real-time feedback about where they should go and how they should do it. I'm talking about something 240 miles up, not 240 miles less a week.
Yeah.
Right? Where you can't rapidly get to them if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we looked at the most innovative technology, and we've actually found that just some of the basic technologies like wireless video is great. Have you looked at that?
Yeah. When we were looking at sites and the businesses across the company that could potentially leverage smart eyewear, some of those discussions resulted in let's just get a GoPro or something simpler if all that utility isn't needed right away. And I think that's a great approach, right? Because I think it's based on your risk tolerance and how you're structured to deploy innovation. But I think you bring up a great point. Sometimes it's better to start down with a simpler solution and then kind of prove you need something more complex.
I think, in my experience, so I'm just recently sort of a technology-focused person. I had previously been a chief engineer at Raytheon and then an operator in the Navy in nuclear power. So I've spent my life on the other end of the side of whatever the analogy is. So your point is well taken, and I would even take it even a step further. you see coming out of Silicon Valley or out of these technology companies a push for finding a problem for their solution, right? So people go into facilities and say, I've got augmented reality and I know you need it. I'm just going to stick it somewhere where you need it and I need to find that. Versus going in and saying, well, let me take a holistic, what are your pain points? What are your problems? Oh, in situ training of millennials, workforce, not being able to find the right talent. Things like that are our problems. And so how do you remedy those problems? Does AR work? Well, it may in some cases. It may be an arrow in your quiver. But nobody ever came in I'm a Six Sigma black belt. I never walked into a factory or facility and said, where do I stick a Kaizen? Where do I stick a lean cell? I said, what first are the problems here? And now let me see in my arrow of different Six Sigma tools what I can pull out for these different solutions in order to get it. And so for me, I'm so now hard-pressed for that, because on my first startup, which was a company called Daiquiri was a very HoloLens-esque type of company where we tried in a very much more or less budgeted type of a thing to build or integrate a system that would work in industry but be immersive. And I realized I found myself pushing a technology and advocating for an AR technology that wasn't ready. And I kind of got guilty, and I kind of did sort of some soul searching and went back, and on this time around I decided, okay, I won't ever do that. I'm going to go back to my old way of saying, I will help provide solutions, but if my product isn't the right solution, I'll be the first person to turn you over to the HoloLens team. In fact, I work very closely with Microsoft and the HoloLens team. They love us. In fact, we might be Microsoft after another couple years if the conversations keep going as well as they are, because in no way do they see not only their current product but future products as being competitive. Just like HTC Vive doesn't think their product is competitive, nor does Oculus. We're not an immersive system. We are supposed to be worn for the guy climbing the wind tower, or the guy out in the field in rain and sleet and water, or the guy on the oil platform, or a whole host of other real-world, risky situations. And so that's where we focus on. We focus on the maintenance, repair, and operations of the systems out there. Other companies focus on the training for the system, the concepting for the system, the fit checks for the system, and all of those things I've had experience in and can tell you or direct you or vector you to the right solution, or at least what today we have is the right solution. So it's a great point.
Great point.
And I love the story, if you guys heard it. If you haven't heard, I'll tell it over the beer, of the old toothpaste factory with the empty boxes of toothpaste. Has anybody heard that story before, where they were having problems with every so often empty boxes of toothpaste? Well, come to me later and I'll let you know.
It's a good story.
So, yeah.
Questions, any other comments? Folks want to share kind of where they're at with their process or how they're approaching some of these things?
Just a question from a risk point of view. Have you thought ahead about having this technology, that we might be exposing people to risks that we hadn't thought of before because we're going to be relying more and more on the technology? Is that something which you've looked at yourselves?
I can take that one.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. You bring up a great point. I think, yes. I talked a little bit about that in terms of some of the features, and I think it's really important as you're looking at your risk matrix and trying to figure out what to tackle and where technology can provide value. You've almost got a concurrent matrix for that technology. What do we need to look for? What don't we know about? And I think the answers to those questions may push you to a more controlled pilot or a less controlled pilot, where I think you can pull some of that out. At least for us, a lot of times we would go into that, we wouldn't know all of those answers. So we had to be very careful about where we went first, who was engaged, what were we trying to do. Good point.
Nobody goes into, and like when we were engineering these very complex military systems at Raytheon, we don't go into engineering one of those systems without trying to figure out whatever risk is going to be for the situation that we're putting it in. Where I think you see a disconnect is when you're trying to repurpose a system that wasn't built and wasn't thought about that way. Now, am I going to get every single risk? No. Does Android release the next version of Android thinking they have all sorts of risks and security gaps in their 8.1 or their 9.0 Android system? Of course not. Things are discovered over time, so it's the unknown. So even in military systems where you have a whole department thinking about risks and what that system could possibly do or how it could fail, you still have escapes. You still have misses. But when you take a
iPad and you bring it in, who has never thought about what risks an iPad could introduce or what risks a cellular phone could introduce into the market, then you're not even doing the process of trying to think about those risks. At least when you go, and I'll now speak and you know, from my company's perspective, we've thought about risks in industry from day one. Our VP of Industrial Design rejects the name of Industrial Design. He is the VP of Human Experience and Human Factors. Okay, so we have a VP of Human Factors at a startup. I don't think very many startups have that. But since we're so focused on safety as our number one thing, then productivity. Safety, then productivity. I had this great guy named John Waldron, who's the CEO of Honeywell's SPS group, Safety and Productivity Group. He drew a Cartesian coordinate. In one branch, he had safety, the other had productivity. He drew an arc, and he said, we never do anything that doesn't move the whole arc out. So if we're doing something that increases productivity, it also must increase safety. So not only are we trying to think about things or unintended consequences of a system like the RealWear HMT1, we're trying to actually improve the safety. I'm trying to say, instead of head down, hands occupied, heads up, hands free. Got to be qualitatively safer in some way. Now, there could be a secondary effect that we're not thinking about, that I haven't even thought about, that comes along. Somebody gets some system, yank them on the boom arm or something like that. I mean, we've even thought about those sort of things. I don't know, but at least we're doing, I think, the diligence more than I've seen other technology companies in trying to identify those risks as we field products.
Hey, two things to add to that, to add on. You know, one, I think that's the importance of having a good partnership with your solution providers, internally, externally. Our approach has always been that these are second, third lines of defense. It's not going to be the primary line of defense out of the gate. It shouldn't be until you've proven that it should be, and none of our tools that we have out there that have been deployed are primary defenses. I think that'll change, but that could be a way to mitigate some of that. Yeah.
Specific to the HTL1, is it intrinsically safe?
We have two versions, two products. So we have a IS version, and then we have a non-IS version. So the intrinsically safe version is ATEX Zone 1 FMC C1D1. So it's a full C1D1 device, and we have that available in mass production already as well. Yeah. You know, one thing I'll say, and we're getting kind of close, maybe we have time for one or so more questions, but I do want to say before we run out of time that a lot of times, you know, from the chief engineer, and you say EH&S, and it's a corporate function a lot of times it's influencers and not direct budgets and direct things and direct sort of impact, or at least kind of that's the feeling in some organizations. What I want to say is with GE, and with in particular Sam, I couldn't have had a better partner. I couldn't have had a better entry point into GE, because he became an advocate from the side of safety. So he started with safety, and then he's gone to businesses and has understood the needs not only in a safety dimension, but a productivity dimension. So he's been an internal advocate across the business. And with that sort of partnership, we've been able to infect and impact all the corners of GE versus just a silo in a certain business. And so I've been just completely impressed by the relationship and how GE has incorporated EH&S as like a fundamental fabric or DNA of their overall organization, a real powerful part of their organization. I think it's very important. I think other companies will find that that's more of a success-orientated attitude, if you will. So I really appreciate Sam, and even though he doesn't have any stock, you'll get some when we get out of here, because he's sure stewing up a RealWear show here for us. I'm just kidding.
No, I can, to add into some of that. So our strategy has always been we're not going to drive it from corporate. We need to grassroots it, and we need to try and remove all the barriers and build essentially the deployment kit for the businesses. So we're set up in a way where we can sponsor and fund the insertion of the technology, but as it goes forward, we're not driving. We're trying to be there as a support mechanism and share those successes. So I think it is a good model for folks that are thinking about that or have their own model. It's very important you've got something like that in place to transition from pilot evaluation over to deployment and scale. So,
any other, maybe one time?
Yeah, comments, questions? We got a couple minutes. Anyone want to share experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly? Those are always good. Nothing?
I'll tell you the toothpaste story. Okay.
Wait, before you do that. Before you do that, question just in general, where do you see 5-10 years from now the future of wearable computing, immersive computing? What does it look like from RealWear's
Oh,
perspective?
that's a great question. So,
Not to interrupt the toothpaste.
no,
story,
but this may be more important question answer. So the bottom line is, and you said it already on one of your slides, we're in the business of knowledge transfer. So from even the attitude that I had at my tech company, that we're in the business of knowledge transfer. So how do we most easily, smoothly, effectively get the knowledge from something to the person's brain? So that could be safety knowledge. Hey, don't step there, you might get shocked. It could be machine knowledge. Oh, the machine has got an out-around shaft or something and it's wobbling. I need to have that knowledge. Or an expert that's been doing this for 30 years, I need to have that knowledge. I mean, if we could do it, we wouldn't have contact lenses. We would do like Trinity does on the roof and says, download the program for the B-212 helicopter and get me going here. And all of a sudden, you're flying off on a helicopter. So what we do is try to do the 2018 version of that kind of knowledge transfer. So what I see we do as we continue to expand in 5 and 10 years is we're searching for platforms that enable that, enable connectivity, enable quicker and quicker, more comprehensive knowledge transfer, but look for the solutions that do it in the simplest, simpler than simplest type of way. In fact, it's funny you should say that when people at my company tell me, we need to do this Apple simple. I go, no, we have to be much more simple than Apple. You know, these guys that are working out, I had a guy the other day on a crane system, his name was Spike, and he referred to himself as Spike. Spike doesn't do computers. Spike doesn't do emails. I said, all right, Spike, let's just try this out. Our systems have to be that bloody simple for folks that just don't want to even deal with technology, and those are our users. So that's what we're angling for, and that's what we're trying to do, and
Yeah.
I can't even imagine 10 years from now what will be available, but
Yeah.
we will be in the business of knowledge transfer at RealWear in 10 years from now.
Nice. It's a great way to end it. Oh, one more quick one. It's a good
No,
story.
I-
You should
it's
find
a
him later.
beer-drinking
I think.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a bit I find is both fascinating and scary. Like fascinating because we're incorporating technology to just about everything we do. The scary bit is that we're far too dependent on it.
Yeah.
And a great example I can give you is, and I wish we were like in the Matrix where you can suck all that knowledge, but
Maybe we
it's
are.
just they're just emulating directions, right? So it's, in a way, you're kind of making us so dependent on it that we don't even know how to read a map. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they confuse us
Yeah.
from those things that are rigorous in our training.
Yeah.
You know, you said you were in the nuclear industry. There's certain things that doesn't matter what the instruction says, you know what to do.
Right.
But I will tell you this, it's inevitable.
Just gonna say, I think.
Right, so we fought this for the longest
Yeah.
time. Like, I just want to use my phone to make calls. And like everyone I know except maybe my grandma has one of these.
Yeah, I think it's the importance of a holistic approach. You're not going to remove training in the way it's done today. It's augmentation. It's a tool in the toolbox. I think that's where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're right. It is a different world that we're moving into. But I talk to historians because sometimes looking back in the past is the best way to see the future. And I have this very good friend named Philip Zellico, who's a professor at University of Virginia, who's also the author of the 9/11 Commission Report, has worked for every living president, so he's a very kind of well-known political professor of history, so to speak. And what he said to me was so funny that if you go back in history and you look at what all in the 1880s, when the steam engine was coming about, all the farmers were like, this is the end of the world. Industry will end everything as we know it. All the jobs are going away. They're all being automated. All these different things are happening and all these machines, and we're losing everything. And then we moved into the industrial age. And now we're in the information age. And the same discussion's happening again. All these billionaires, they had the same billionaires, the Rockefellers of this and that, the billionaires of the industrial age. Now we have the Zuckerbergs and all these other folks of the billionaires of the information age. And so the same sort of historical repetition is happening. Now, maybe the next age is computer age and we'll be all out and wiped out, and then we will have a right to complain about things. But for now, it still looks like, I think, a bright future, and I'm not worried about the robots taking off so much. And if they do, we have our HMT-1s to battle all the robots with. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah.